Hello and welcome back to our channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most powerful and epic stories ever told, a tale of oppression, desperation, and a destiny that would change the world. It begins not with a king or a conqueror, but with a cry in the darkness and a mother's impossible choice. This is the story of Moses, but it starts long before he became a leader. Imagine this. The Israelites, God's chosen people, are living as slaves in the mighty land of Egypt. For 400 years, they have toiled under the blistering sun, building cities for a Pharaoh who sees them not as people, but as a threat. Their numbers are growing, and this strength, which should be a blessing, has become a source of fear for the Egyptian ruler. Pharaoh, consumed by paranoia, devises a cruel and heart-wrenching plan. He commands his people to throw every newborn Hebrew boy into the great Nile River. Can you even begin to fathom that level of cruelty? A state-sanctioned order to eliminate an entire generation. It was a time of unimaginable grief, where the sound of a baby's cry brought not joy, but terror. But in the midst of this darkness, a flicker of defiance and love shines through. A Levite woman named Jochebed gives birth to a beautiful baby boy. She looks at her son, and her heart refuses to accept Pharaoh's decree. For 3 months she hides him, her every moment filled with the anxiety of discovery. The slightest sound, the faintest cry, could mean death. This wasn't just an act of maternal love. It was an act of profound faith and rebellion against an evil decree. As the baby grows, hiding him becomes impossible. Jochebed knows she is running out of time. So with a heavy heart, she devises a plan that is both desperate and ingenious. She weaves a small basket from papyrus reeds, waterproofing it with tar and pitch. It's a tiny ark, a vessel of hope. With tears streaming down her face, she places her precious son inside and sets the basket among the reeds on the bank of the Nile, the very river designated as a tomb for Hebrew boys. It's a breathtaking gamble. She entrusts her son not just to a basket, but to the hands of Providence. His older sister, Miriam, watches from a distance, her heart pounding, her eyes fixed on the tiny vessel holding her brother's fate. Every ripple in the water, every rustle of the reeds must have felt like an eternity. And then the unthinkable happens. A royal procession approaches the riverbank. It's Pharaoh's own daughter, coming to bathe. She notices the strange basket floating among the reeds and sends her attendant to fetch it. Imagine the tension of that moment. As she opens the basket, she sees the baby boy crying. Her heart is moved with compassion. She knows immediately this is one of the Hebrew children. At this pivotal moment, young Miriam bravely steps forward. "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" she asks. Pharaoh's daughter agrees. And who does Miriam bring? Her own mother, Jochebed. It's a miraculous turn of events. Not only is her son's life spared, but Jochebed is now being paid by the princess to nurse and care for her own child. She gets to hold him, feed him, and whisper the stories and faith of their people into his ear before he is taken to the palace. Once weaned, the boy is brought to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopts him as her own. She names him Moses, which means to draw out, because, as she says, "I drew him out of the water." From a death sentence in the Nile, Moses is elevated to a life of unimaginable privilege within the very court of the man who wanted him dead. He is raised as a prince of Egypt. He receives the finest education, learning the wisdom, culture, and military strategies of the most powerful empire in the world. He wears fine linens, eats at the royal table, and walks the halls of power. On the surface, he is Egyptian royalty. But beneath the surface, a silent conflict is brewing. He knows his true identity. Jochebed's early influence and Miriam's watchful eye would have ensured that. He sees the suffering of his people, the Israelites, every day. He witnesses the whip of the taskmasters. He hears their cries of anguish. He is living a paradox, a prince by day, a Hebrew by blood. This dual identity creates a storm within him. He is a man caught between two worlds, the world of the oppressor, which has given him everything, and the world of the oppressed, which is his own flesh and blood. Every luxury he enjoys is built on the backs of his people. This internal struggle, this question of who am I, is the crucible that will begin to shape the man who is destined to become a deliverer. His life in the palace was not just a comfortable upbringing. It was a divine preparation. God was equipping him with the skills, the knowledge of the court, and the understanding of the Egyptian mindset, all tools he would one day need for a mission he could not yet comprehend. The story of Moses's early life teaches us that our beginnings do not define our endings. It shows us that even in the darkest of times, acts of love, courage, and faith can set in motion a chain of events that leads to incredible miracles. Jochebed's faith, Miriam's courage, and the compassion of a foreign princess all played a part in God's master plan. The boy in the basket, the prince in the palace, is on a collision course with destiny. The conflict within him is about to erupt, leading to a fateful decision that will change his life and the course of history forever. Imagine this. You've been raised in the lap of luxury, a prince of Egypt, one of the most powerful empires the world has ever known. Yet you carry a secret. You are not Egyptian by blood. Your people, the Hebrews, are slaves toiling under the brutal Egyptian sun. This was Moses's reality. The scriptures tell us that as he grew, he went out to his own people and looked on their burdens. This wasn't a casual glance from a royal chariot. This was a deliberate act of empathy, a choice to see the suffering he had been shielded from. He saw the whips, he heard the cries, he felt the injustice deep in his bones. The comfort of the palace became a cage, and the truth of his identity began to burn within him. One fateful day, this internal conflict erupted into action. Moses witnessed an Egyptian taskmaster mercilessly beating a Hebrew slave. In a flash of righteous anger, a moment of passion overwhelming reason, he intervened. He struck the Egyptian, killing him, and hastily buried the body in the sand. He thought his act was a secret, a hidden blow for justice. But secrets have a way of coming to light. The very next day, Moses tried to break up a fight between two Hebrews, and his secret was thrown back in his face. "Who made you a prince and a judge over us?" One of them sneered. "Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" The news was out. His life as he knew it was over. Word reached Pharaoh, and the man who was once like a son to him was now a wanted man, a fugitive with a death sentence on his head. Moses had to run. He fled everything he had ever known, the power, the privilege, the identity of an Egyptian prince. He ran east, into the vast, unforgiving wilderness of the Sinai Peninsula, with nothing but the clothes on his back and the weight of his actions on his soul. Think about that journey. Stripped of his royal robes, his status, his security. The desert is a great equalizer. It doesn't care if you're a prince or a pauper. Out there, survival is the only currency. This was the beginning of Moses's unmaking, the necessary dismantling of the prince to make way for the prophet. He was being stripped down to his essential self, forced to rely on instincts and a faith he was only beginning to understand. His journey led him to the land of Midian. Exhausted and alone, he sat by a well, a place of life and gathering in the ancient world. It was there his story took another turn. The 7 daughters of a local priest named Jethro came to water their father's flock, but were driven away by aggressive shepherds. Once again, Moses's innate sense of justice kicked in. He stood up, defended the women, and even helped them water their flock. When the daughters returned home early, their father, Jethro, was surprised. They told him of the Egyptian who had helped them. Jethro, a wise and hospitable man, insisted they invite this stranger to share a meal. This act of kindness marked a new chapter for Moses. He found a home, a community, and a family. He would go on to marry one of Jethro's daughters, Zipporah, and start a new life. But this new life was a world away from the splendors of Egypt. The man who was once waited on hand and foot, who commanded soldiers, now had a new job: shepherd. For the next 40 years, Moses led flocks of sheep through the rugged mountains and silent valleys of Midian. 40 years. Let that sink in. From the bustling capital of a superpower to the quiet, monotonous rhythm of a shepherd's life. This wasn't a demotion. It was a re-education. As a prince, he learned about power, strategy, and command from the top down. As a shepherd, he learned about care, patience, and guidance from the ground up. He learned to navigate treacherous terrain, to find water where there seemed to be none, to protect the vulnerable, and to lead with gentle persistence, not brute force. Most importantly, he learned humility. Out there, under the vast, starry sky, alone with the bleating of sheep and the whisper of the wind, the ego of the prince was sandblasted away. The desert became his classroom, and solitude was his teacher. He had time to reflect on his past, on his identity, on the plight of his people, and on the God he was slowly coming to know, not through royal ritual, but through the raw, untamed beauty of creation. This long period of quiet obscurity is one of the most crucial parts of his story. It's where the impulsive, hot-headed prince was molded into a patient, wise, and resilient leader. God was preparing him, not in the courts of power, but in the crucible of the wilderness. He was learning the landscape, not just of Midian, but of leadership and dependence on a higher power. He was being emptied of his own strength so that he could be filled with a strength far greater. So the next time you feel like you in a desert season of your own life, a time of waiting, of quietness, where it feels like nothing is happening, remember Moses. It's often in these periods of seeming insignificance that the most profound character development takes place. The world may have forgotten the fugitive prince, but he was being prepared for a destiny far greater than he could have ever imagined. His greatest work was still ahead of him, and it would all begin right here, in the heart of the wilderness. Then, one ordinary day on Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, something extraordinary happens. Moses sees a bush engulfed in flames, yet it's not burning up. Curiosity pulls him closer, and from that fire a voice calls his name. "Moses, Moses!" It's the voice of God. God tells him to take off his sandals, for he is standing on holy ground. In that moment, the ordinary becomes sacred. This teaches us a powerful lesson. God can show up anywhere, at any time, in the midst of our most mundane routines, and transform our ordinary ground into a holy space. God gets straight to the point. He has seen the suffering of his people, the Israelites enslaved in Egypt. He has heard their cries, and he is sending Moses to Pharaoh to bring them out. Talk about a job description. Go to the most powerful ruler on earth and demand he release his entire slave labor force. How does Moses react? Does he say, "Yes, Lord, here I am, send me"? Absolutely not. His reaction is so human, so relatable. His first question is, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" This isn't false humility. It's raw, honest insecurity. He's a forgotten shepherd with a criminal past and a speech impediment. In his own eyes, he is the least qualified person for the job. He's looking at his own inadequacies, his own limitations. And this is where the story gets really good. God doesn't answer Moses' question directly. He doesn't say, "Moses, you're a great leader, you're charismatic, you've got this." Instead, God shifts the focus entirely. He says, "I will be with you." The promise isn't in Moses' ability, but in God's presence. It's not about who Moses is, it's about who is with him. This is a game changer for us, too. When we feel inadequate, the question isn't, "Who am I?" but "Who is with me?" God's presence is the ultimate qualification, but Moses isn't convinced. He's a practical guy. He throws another question at God. "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" He's looking for credentials, for a name that carries authority. God's answer is one of the most profound and mysterious statements in all of Scripture. He says, "I am who I am." Or in some translations, "I will be what I will be." This isn't just a name. It's a declaration of eternal, self-existent, and active being. He is the uncreated creator, the source of all that is. He's essentially telling Moses, "My name is my very existence. I am everything you will ever need. When you need a deliverer, I am. When you need a provider, I am. When you need strength, I am." God is not a limited being defined by a simple title. He is the infinite reality that will meet every need as it arises. Even with this incredible revelation, Moses is still stuck on his own shortcomings. He protests again. "What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, 'The Lord did not appear to you'?" He's paralyzed by the fear of rejection, the fear of failure. He's imagining the worst-case scenario, so God condescends to Moses' fear and gives him signs. He asks, "What is that in your hand?" Moses answers, "A staff." A simple, ordinary shepherd's staff. God tells him to throw it on the ground, and it becomes a snake. Moses runs from it. Then God tells him to pick it up by the tail, a risky move, and it turns back into a staff. The message is powerful. The ordinary tool in your hand, when surrendered to God, can become a conduit for miraculous power. God gives him a second sign. He tells Moses to put his hand inside his cloak. When he pulls it out, it's leprous, white as snow. He puts it back in, and it's restored. This sign demonstrates God's power over life, death, and disease. He's showing Moses that he is the Lord of all circumstances, even the most frightening and seemingly irreversible ones. God even gives him a third sign, the turning of water from the Nile into blood. just in case the first two aren't enough. You'd think by now Moses would be ready to go. He's had a personal encounter with God, received his name, and been given 3 miraculous signs. But he has one last objection, and it's his biggest one. "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent. I am slow of speech and tongue." He points to his personal, deeply felt weakness. He's essentially saying, "God, you've picked the wrong guy. I can't speak well." God's response is both a gentle rebuke and a powerful encouragement. Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. God reminds Moses that he is the one who created him, weaknesses and all. The very thing Moses sees as a disqualifier, God sees as an opportunity to display his power. God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. Your greatest weakness, when surrendered to God, can become the very place where his strength is most perfectly displayed. After all this back and forth, this divine negotiation, Moses finally runs out of excuses. He has to face the fact that God is not taking no for an answer, so he agrees to go. He takes his wife and sons, and with that ordinary staff, now the staff of God in his hand, he heads back to Egypt. He returns to the land of his failure, the source of his trauma, but this time he's not a fugitive running away. Now he's heading back to the land he once fled, Egypt, with a message that will shake the empire to its core. Imagine the scene. Moses, a man who once stuttered, now stands before the mighty Pharaoh. The courts of Egypt are dripping with gold and luxury, a testament to Pharaoh's absolute power. He sees himself not just as a king, but as a god on earth. And into this arena of arrogance walks Moses, armed with nothing but a wooden staff and a divine command. He looks Pharaoh in the eye and delivers the message. "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go." You can almost hear the laughter echoing through the halls. Let them go? Pharaoh's entire empire was built on the backs of these Hebrew slaves. Their labor built his cities, his monuments, his legacy. To him, this request isn't just absurd, it's an insult. Pharaoh's response is pure defiance. Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go. This isn't just a negotiation, it's a declaration of war, a spiritual war. On one side you have human pride and power, represented by Pharaoh. On the other, the unseen but omnipotent will of God, represented by Moses. Pharaoh thinks he's in control, so he doubles down. He makes the slaves' lives even more miserable, forcing them to make bricks without straw. He wants to crush their spirit, to show them that their God is powerless against him. But this act of cruelty is a fatal miscalculation. It's the move that sets the stage for a series of events so catastrophic, so awe-inspiring that they would be talked about for thousands of years. The 10 plagues of Egypt are about to begin. The first plague strikes at the very heart of Egypt's lifeblood, the Nile River. The Nile wasn't just a river. It was a deity, the source of fertility and life. At God's command, Aaron, Moses' brother, strikes the water with his staff, and in an instant the entire river turns to blood. The fish die, the water becomes undrinkable, and a stench of death fills the air. It's a direct challenge to the Egyptian gods. Pharaoh's magicians, using their dark arts, manage to replicate the trick on a small scale. So Pharaoh hardens his heart. He sees it as a contest of magic, not a divine warning. He's not impressed, but the plagues escalate. Next come the frogs. Not just a few frogs, but a relentless, slimy invasion. They are in their houses, in their beds, in their ovens. It's a disgusting, overwhelming nuisance. Pharaoh, unable to stand it, calls for Moses. He says, "Plead with the Lord to take away the frogs, and I will let the people go." But the moment the frogs disappear, Pharaoh goes back on his word. His heart hardens once again. This becomes a pattern, a devastating plague, a moment of desperation, a broken promise, and an even harder heart. The plagues that follow become more and more severe, each one a systematic dismantling of the Egyptian pantheon and a strike against their way of life. Gnats, then swarms of flies, attack the Egyptians, but mysteriously the land of Goshen, where the Israelites live, is spared. This is a crucial detail. It shows that these are not random natural disasters. They are targeted, intelligent acts of judgment. The message is clear. The God of the Hebrews is in control, protecting his people while punishing their oppressors. Then the plagues turn deadly. A pestilence wipes out the livestock of the Egyptians, yet not a single animal belonging to the Israelites dies. Next, festering boils break out on the skin of every Egyptian, from the priests to the common folk. Imagine the panic and the pain. Yet Pharaoh's pride is stronger than his people's suffering. He refuses to yield. The confrontation escalates to a terrifying new level with the seventh plague, a hailstorm of fire and ice. Something utterly unnatural. The sky darkens and a storm of unimaginable fury rains down, destroying crops, trees, and anyone caught outside. Yet Goshen remains untouched, a pocket of peace in the midst of fiery destruction. This should have been the final straw. But Pharaoh's arrogance has become a prison. He is no longer just defying God. He is at war with reality itself. Locusts follow, devouring anything the hail didn't destroy, turning Egypt from a fertile paradise into a barren wasteland. And then comes a plague that is psychological as much as it is physical. A thick, oppressive darkness. For 3 days a palpable darkness covers all of Egypt. A darkness so profound, people couldn't even see their own hands. They were frozen in place, isolated in a terrifying black void. Meanwhile, in Goshen there was light. It is a powerful symbol. The Egyptians are trapped in the spiritual darkness of their own making, while the Israelites live in the light of God's presence. After 3 days of this suffocating gloom, Pharaoh is enraged. He summons Moses and screams, "Get out of my sight, and don't let me see your face again, for on the day you see my face, you shall die." Moses' calm reply is chilling. "You have spoken well. I will never see your face again." The final, most devastating plague is coming. But before it does, God institutes a new ritual, a covenant of protection for his people, the Passover. Each Israelite family is instructed to take a perfect, unblemished lamb. They are to slaughter it and paint its blood on the doorposts of their homes. That night, they are to roast the lamb and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, fully dressed and ready to leave at a moment's notice. The blood on the door is a sign. God tells them that when the angel of death passes through Egypt that night, it will pass over the homes marked with the blood, sparing the firstborn inside. This is a profound act of faith. They had to trust that this ritual, this blood, would be their salvation. It wasn't about the strength of their door. It was about their obedience and faith in God's promise. As night falls, a great and terrible cry rises throughout the land of Egypt. The final plague has struck. In every Egyptian home, from the palace of Pharaoh to the dungeon of the prisoner, the firstborn son is dead. Even the firstborn of the livestock perish. But in Goshen, where the doors are marked with blood, there is silence. There is safety. Faith has become their shield. The grief and terror in Egypt are absolute. The god-king Pharaoh, whose own firstborn son now lies dead, is finally broken. His pride, his power, his gods all have failed him. He summons Moses and Aaron in the middle of the night, not with anger, but with desperate urgency. "Up, go out from among my people," he cries. "Go serve the Lord, as you have said. Take your flocks and your herds and be gone." He doesn't just let them go. He begs them to leave. The great exodus has begun. After 430 years of bondage, the children of Israel, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, walk out of Egypt not as fleeing slaves, but as a liberated nation laden with the silver and gold of the Egyptians, who are now desperate to see them gone. Pharaoh has changed his mind. He's coming, not just with a few soldiers, but with his entire army. 600 of his best chariots, the most advanced military technology of the age, are thundering across the desert floor, closing in fast. The ground trembles with their approach. Suddenly you're trapped. In front of you lies the vast, impassable expanse of the Red Sea. Behind you, the dust cloud of Pharaoh's vengeful army grows larger, the glint of spear and helmet more terrifyingly clear. There is nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The joy of freedom evaporates, replaced by sheer, gut-wrenching panic. The people turn on Moses, their voices raw with fear and anger. "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." Imagine the pressure on Moses in that moment. His people are on the verge of mutiny. A superpower's army is about to descend upon them. The sea blocks their path. It is the ultimate dead end, a situation with no logical human solution. Everything he has worked for, everything God has promised, seems destined to end in a massacre on the shores of this sea. Failure seems not just possible, but inevitable. But Moses doesn't panic. In the face of this overwhelming despair, he stands firm, his voice ringing out with an authority that silences the crowd. "Do not be afraid," he declares. "Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Be still? How can they be still? The command seems insane. Every instinct is screaming to run, to fight, to do something. But Moses is telling them to stop and trust. Then God speaks to Moses, and what he says is even more perplexing. "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move forward." Forward? Forward into the sea? It's a command that defies all reason. It's a call to walk directly into an impossible, watery grave. This is a critical moment. It's the point where human logic ends and divine faith must begin. Moses has to choose. Will he trust his own eyes, which see only certain death? Or will he trust the voice of God, which commands the impossible? Moses makes his choice. He obeys. As the pillar of cloud moves behind the Israelites, plunging the pursuing Egyptians into darkness while casting light upon the path of the Israelites, Moses stands at the edge of the water. He raises his staff, the same simple wooden staff he used to shepherd sheep. the same staff that turned into a snake and brought forth the plagues. He stretches his hand out over the sea, and then the impossible happens. A strong east wind begins to blow. It doesn't just create ripples. It howls with supernatural force all through the night. The water doesn't just recede, it begins to divide. The sea literally splits in two, piling up into massive, towering walls of water on the left and on the right. Where moments before there was an impassable sea, there is now a wide, dry path. Can you even comprehend the sight? Walls of liquid turquoise held back by an unseen hand, with fish swimming as if in a giant aquarium on either side of you. The seabed, once deep and muddy, is now solid ground under your feet. With fear and awe, the Israelites step onto the path. They begin to walk not around the sea, but through it. A whole nation, men, women, children, and livestock, marching between two liquid walls under the light of the pillar of fire. The Egyptians, seeing the path, are filled with arrogant confidence. They charge in after them, their chariots thundering onto the dry seabed. They believe their victory is at hand. They don't recognize this as God's power. They see it only as a strange, lucky break they can exploit. But God has other plans. He looks down from the pillar of fire and cloud and throws the Egyptian army into a panic. The wheels of their chariots get stuck, clogged in the seabed. Suddenly their greatest military advantage becomes a liability. They are bogged down, trapped in the very path they thought would lead to their triumph. Terror seizes them. "Let's get away from the Israelites," they scream. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. As the last Israelite steps onto the far shore, God gives Moses another command. "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." Moses obeys once more. He stretches out his hand, and at daybreak the sea returns to its full depth. The walls of water collapse. The full, crushing weight of the Red Sea crashes down upon the entire Egyptian army. The chariots, the horsemen, Pharaoh's elite forces, not one of them survived. As the sun rises, the Israelites stand on the shore of freedom, looking back. The bodies of their former masters, the most feared warriors in the world, are washing up on the sand. The threat is gone. Not just defeated, but utterly annihilated. The impossible has happened. They are truly, finally free. A profound silence of awe falls over the people. The fear, the anger, the doubt, it all melts away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of reverence and gratitude. They didn't just witness a miracle. They walked through it. They saw the power of their God firsthand. They saw the power of their God firsthand. And then a new sound rises. It's not the sound of complaint or fear. It's the sound of singing. Miriam, Moses' sister, takes a tambourine in her hand, and all the women follow her with tambourines and dancing. And they sing a song of victory, a song of freedom, the very first song recorded in the Bible. Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. Both horse and driver he is hurled into the sea. The entire nation joins in, their voices rising in a powerful chorus of praise to the God who had saved them when all hope was lost. They had walked out of slavery and through the heart of the sea into a new beginning. Their journey was far from over, but on that day, on the shores of the Red Sea, they were no longer just a group of escaped slaves. Their newfound freedom was immediately tested. With the Egyptian army in hot pursuit, The Israelites found themselves trapped between the charging chariots and the vast Red Sea. Panic and fear gripped the people. They cried out to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die?" It was a moment of supreme crisis. But Moses, holding fast to his faith, raised his staff. And then the impossible happened again. A mighty wind parted the waters, creating a dry path through the heart of the sea. The Israelites walked through on dry ground, walls of water towering on either side. Once they were safely across, the waters crashed back down, swallowing the Egyptian army. It was a miraculous deliverance that would be sung about for generations. But the challenges were far from over. The journey ahead was through a vast and unforgiving wilderness. Food was scarce, water was bitter. The people, accustomed to slavery but not to hardship, began to grumble. They forgot the miracles and longed for the meager comforts of Egypt. Yet in their time of need, God provided. Manna, a mysterious bread-like substance, appeared on the ground each morning. Water gushed from a rock when Moses struck it. Through every trial, God was teaching them to depend on Him, transforming them from a nation of slaves into a people of faith. 3 months into their journey, they arrived at the foot of a formidable, smoke-covered mountain, Mount Sinai. Here, the relationship between God and His people would be formalized. Moses ascended the mountain alone, entering the thick cloud of God's presence to receive a covenant, a sacred agreement for His people. For 40 days and 40 nights Moses was with God, receiving the laws that would govern and shape the nation. Central to this were the 10 Commandments, etched by the finger of God onto 2 tablets of stone. These weren't just rules. They were the foundational principles for a just and righteous society, a blueprint for living in relationship with God and with one another. While Moses was on the mountain, a scene of profound betrayal was unfolding below. The people grew impatient. Where is this Moses? They wondered. In their fear and uncertainty, they turned back to what they knew, idolatry. They gathered their gold, melted it down, and fashioned a golden calf, proclaiming, "This is your God, who brought you out of Egypt." When Moses descended from Sinai, carrying the sacred tablets, the sight and sound of the people's revelry broke his heart and shattered his spirit. In a moment of righteous anger, he threw the tablets to the ground, smashing them, a symbol of the covenant the people had already broken. It was a devastating blow. Moses had to plead with God not to destroy the very people he had just liberated. This incident revealed the immense weight of leadership. Moses wasn't just a liberator. He was a mediator, standing in the gap between a holy God and a rebellious people. Despite the people's failings, God's relationship with Moses grew even more intimate. The Scriptures tell us that God spoke to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. This wasn't a physical description, but a profound statement about the unique and personal connection they shared. Moses was given the privilege of seeing God's glory, of knowing Him in a way no one else did. He would reascend the mountain, receive a new set of tablets, and continue to lead the people. But the consequence of their rebellion at Sinai and other moments of faithlessness was severe. The generation that left Egypt, with a few exceptions, would not be the one to enter the promised land. They were destined to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. 1 year for each day the spies had faithlessly surveyed the land. During these long years, Moses' role transformed. He was no longer just a miracle worker who confronted Pharaoh. He became the shepherd of their souls. He taught them God's laws, settled their disputes, guided their daily lives, and continually interceded for them. He patiently bore their complaints and guided their steps, shaping a new generation that would be ready to inherit the promise. This was perhaps his most difficult and thankless task, nurturing a nation in the crucible of the desert. After 4 decades of wandering, the long journey was nearing its end. The Israelites stood at the border of Canaan, the promised land. A new faithful generation was ready to cross the Jordan River and claim their inheritance. But their beloved leader, Moses, would not be going with them. Because of a moment of disobedience earlier in their journey, when he struck the rock for water instead of speaking to it as commanded, he too was barred from entering. God led the now 120-year-old Moses to the top of Mount Nebo. From this high vantage point, he could see the entire expanse of the land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He saw the rolling hills, the fertile valleys, the land flowing with milk and honey. It was all there, spread out before him, the destination of his life's work, the future of his people. He saw the promise fulfilled, but he would not step foot in it. Can you imagine the mix of emotions? The joy of seeing the dream realized, mingled with the personal sorrow of not being able to enter. It was the final, ultimate act of faith and surrender. His task was complete. On that mountain, alone with God, Moses, the servant of the Lord, died. His story didn't end in failure, but in fulfillment. He had successfully led his people to the very edge of their destiny. Though he never crossed the Jordan River, Moses' legacy flows through the rest of human history. He is revered as the greatest prophet in Judaism, a foundational figure in Christianity, and an honored prophet in Islam. The laws he delivered at Sinai became the bedrock of Western legal and ethical thought. A story of the Exodus, of a people moving from bondage to freedom under his leadership, has become a universal symbol of liberation and hope for oppressed people everywhere. But perhaps his greatest legacy is one of faith. He was a man who doubted himself but trusted in God. He faced down a king, parted a sea, and communed with the divine. He carried the weight of a nation on his shoulders, leading them through deserts and rebellions, never losing sight of the promise. Moses' life teaches us that our past doesn't define our future, that true leadership is service, and that even when we can't see the end of our own journey, faith can guide us to the edge of a promise far greater than ourselves. His story is a powerful reminder that one person, aligned with a divine purpose, can truly change the world. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the incredible life of Moses. If this story inspired you, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next exploration into the lives of history's most fascinating figures. Until next time, stay curious and keep seeking the stories that shape our world.